Hello, and welcome back to the Living Internet Alliance podcast. In this episode, we spoke with Brian Mairhofer about the nature of creativity, tuning into the body for its somatic intelligence, and becoming a vessel to receive insights from the collective consciousness or the collective field and transmute that into your writing. We also had many people from the audience come in and give interesting takes on the future of creativity, AI, how not to lose your personal agency and critical thinking skills with AI, and how to use it as a tool rather than a crutch. So, we hope you enjoyed this episode. And just before we hop in, I want to remind you that the Creator Economy Convention has actually been renamed to the Future Proof Creator Summit. And this is headlined by Dan Coe, along with many other prominent creators, writers, and speakers and builders in the industry. Along with this change, there has been a reduction in ticket price. So now the general admission ticket is only $299. The VIP ticket is $999. And if you can't make the trip to Vancouver in June 2026, you can buy a virtual ticket for $150. So you can check this all out at the website link below at thelivinginternet.com, as well as join the free circle community to connect with the speakers, connect with other members of the community, and receive all updates and insights on the convention. Now, without further ado, let's hop right into the episode. Hello, hello. What's up, Brian?
Gang, gang. What's up, brother?
How you doing?
I'm great, man. It's a beautiful day out here in California. Super green. We got a bunch of rain, so just kind of standing out, looking over the hills. It's beautiful. Get some sunshine.
Beautiful. I
How are
can't
you?
say exactly the same. I mean, it is quite beautiful here, but it's snowing. Um,
Ah,
so it's a good day to be inside and just be on the computer creating and podcasting and Twitter spacing. I actually just recorded a podcast that just ended 20 minutes ago or so with Nick Huno, which was pretty fun.
nice.
Yeah, first time I really got a chance to chat with him like long form. He's a super
He,
interesting guy.
he's great, man. Super, super talented. Love that. Do you want to make me host too, so it goes to my audience as well?
Yeah, we can do that. Good idea. Okay, I just sent a co-host invite, so let me know if you got it.
Yeah.
Hey there, Jack and Brian.
Hello,
Hey,
Nick.
Nick.
Though I haven't talked to you before, Brian, I've talked to Jack a good handful of times now.
Good to meet you, brother.
Yes, good to meet you too. I hear you just also met Jesse on his little podcast tour through the American Southwest.
He stayed with us for a couple nights, man. It was such a treat to have him. It was such a treat. We had a lot of fun. He's great to share space with.
Good, good. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's sweet. I saw you guys were riding around in the convertible and in the sun on a hike.
Top
I was like, that looks awesome.
top down, baby. Yeah, yeah. Love it.
Nice.
Love it.
Nick, where remind me, where are you located at?
I'm in New Jersey.
Okay, nice. So it's pretty cold up there for you too.
Yeah, it's a bit chilly here, a bit snowy.
Yeah, same. It builds some good resilience though.
It's true. Cold exposure is very healthy.
Yes.
I've lost that resilience since I moved out of Colorado. Don't know what happened to me.
Yeah, there's definitely trade-offs. Like it is good to build that resilience, build that toughness here, but I'm not getting vitamin D like you are. I'm not like there's just this abundance of energy when you're in the sun that makes it so easy to create and write and express yourself all the time. Here, it's a little bit more like, all right, classic winter arc, like gotta kind of lock in. Um, so I'm
Hibernate a little bit.
craving the sun. Yeah, exactly. A lot of
It's good.
sleep.
But then you just get a bunch of energy bound up. And then hopefully that
Right.
equinox is sort of representative of that unbounding of energy. I like to think of things through that lens.
Precisely.
Yeah.
So while we kind of wait for some people to filter in, and maybe we could do some quote tweets, because I've got it on my profile now. just to try to get some more people in here. But even if not, this will be posted as a podcast to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and other things like this. But I kind of wanted to start with your bio, Brian, the new bio that you have. What does it say
Mm,
exactly? Let me pull it up. Um,
I just
s-
changed it again, but yeah.
Spiritus contra spiritum. What does that mean? Where did it come from?
Spiritus contra spiritum means spirits versus spirits. And it comes from a letter exchange between Bill Wilson, who was the co founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, and Carl Jung about 6 months before Carl Jung.
Nick, is it just me or did we lose Brian?
No, I think the audio cut out.
Okay, let's see.
It's the extra sun hurting the connection.
It might be. Let me shoot him a text. This also might be a recurring theme that X spaces are a little bit buggy.
They are, and also as a side note, there is a like Verizon outage across most of the U.S. right now, and I'm not sure
Really?
what else could be affected by that, whatever caused that, because that's pretty big.
Mm. Well, that's interesting. I have Verizon myself, but I'm on Wi-Fi, so things seem to be fine right now. But that's very interesting. When these global networks go down, um, kind of makes me think like, oh shoot, is this system as stable as we think it is? Like sometimes the web will go down. Like, yeah, I don't know. It doesn't make me feel great that these massive power grids and things can just go down like that.
Yeah, yeah, it is does make you think a little bit. It looks like Brian's back as a listener.
He
If you could
is.
You
hear
guys
us,
hear me
Brian.
now?
Oh, there he is. He's
Yes,
back.
sir.
We were on the
I could hear
bio.
you guys the whole time. Yeah, I went to my crib and then it jumped on the Wi-Fi and then it lost me. Okay, here we go. Co-host. Yes, you guys got me.
Yes, sir. We got you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so spiritus contra spiritum. Spiritus, well, it's Latin, meaning spirits versus spirits. And it's basically this idea that we need spiritual intervention to overcome the things that we're up against, whether they're individual, familial, cultural. A lot of the things that we struggle with are psycho-emotional, which for me falls under the domain of it's a recognition that when I'm up against things that are bigger than myself, whether it's my own resistance towards creativity, or I came up through the lens of 12-step programs, we're all faced with these forces that are bigger than us. And so it's spirits versus spirits, right? I need to arm myself with spiritual defenses, spiritual weapons, if you will, into my own shadow complex or the cultural complex or familial complex of which I find myself up against.
Mm. What does that look like for you? Like, are there rituals that you kind of put yourself through to get yourself into more of a coherent state, or is there like a protection thing you do throughout the day?
Yeah, there are. I mean, I'm a huge meditator, and I specifically have been working with a lot of Joe Dispenza's meditations. I just really try and get to that quantum field. And I
Mhm.
try and land in this place where I no longer use the word surrender. I don't like it. I think it has bad connotations. So instead, my goal is willful communion with other.
Mhm.
And I can break that down a little bit. And so knowing once I am able to find that and get to that space, and I'm just really working through the friction of my body. So in meditation, whatever little fidgets, little nudges, little thoughts, things come up, these little vortexes of the mind that want to suck me in. Um, My job is to simply sort of bypass that friction by attempting to plug my nervous system, this alien technology, into that field and find some aspect of coherence. And so that's a daily practice. And so parallel, there's journaling. There's a lot of, I do a lot of Paramahansa Yogananda affirmation practices,
Hmm.
but that's my daily reprieve. Without that maintenance, I don't really trust my own thinking, to be completely honest.
Mm.
Um, so that really serves as the foundation there.
Interesting. I actually just bought one of Dispenza's meditations. Actually, perfect timing. Natalie hops in. She kind of put me onto these. I bought the abundance meditation, and it was nothing that I expected to hear from him because I've listened to his podcast, I've read his books. His guided meditations are like chants, like they're like mantras. Like he's telling you to like sink into the void and like become nothing and like merge with the blackness. And I'm like, this is not what I expected to hear in an
Yeah.
abundance meditation. But by getting to that place of oneness, that place of nothingness, and that place, most importantly, of infinite possibility, anything can happen. Anything is possible. So, have you found this to have a direct correlation or impact on your creativity or your writing?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think a lot about creating space for ideas and space for creative revelation, and really adopting this primary sort of paradigm and understanding that my brain is really just a receiver of insight, a receiver of behavioral memory, a receiver of this field. And so I seek to self empty as much as possible, right? This process of kenosis, of just trying to create a little bit more permeability within that ego, within that acuity of what I can recognize, and right, and that sort of reticular activating system. But sorry, I get a little tangential, Jack, as you know.
No, we love the tangents.
But pull me back a little bit. What was the question?
Yeah, like, do you find yourself creating from a different place or creation flowing differently out of you, say, if you do one of these practices versus maybe you don't?
I do. I think it allows me to really let go of any type of like result and attachment to what it should be. And I just have more trust in sort of the emergent network of my, I don't know, relationship to life. And so if I can trust that and trust the interconnected of this ness of that, and trust that I'm creating space to bypass any friction that's going to come from me, then it truly feels like I'm collaborating with the forces at large. And
Mhm,
and what it was that wants to come through me is coming through me from the cultural field, right? And so I don't have to ask myself these big questions of, will this connect? Will this register? Where does this have a place? Right? Because I'm trusting where I got the information from in the first place.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've had glimpses of moments where I actually kind of feel like I'm channeling and still like learning exactly what that means or what that feels like. But to be in that state where it's like, yeah, I'm the one typing, but like I am not the one thinking or coming up with the ideas. I'm literally listening for them and then acting on them when they come. It requires this state of patience. Whereas
Mhm.
when I first started writing online, and I still am in this mode a little bit from time to time, and I'm trying to find this dance or middle way, but like there's this whole philosophy of like you just need to get content out. You need to be consistent. You need to put in the work. You need to do the deep work. You need to hammer this every single day. And while there's some truth in that, for sure, consistency does compound. If you get into that rigid state where it's only the mind and there's no dance, there's no looseness, there's no flow, your words aren't going to connect and they're going to resonate. So I love the idea of like, do the meditative practice, do the prayer, whatever it is before you write, because it's going to completely shift the state in which you create. And then whatever you put in is exactly what's going to be felt on the other end.
That's exactly it. Yeah, sort of like a resonance to it. And it's such a practice, and I'm not perfect with it. And this is all just new stuff that I'm learning, and I'm glad you mentioned you touched on the idea of like discipline, because I never considered myself a disciplined person, and I still don't. But I'm a fairly diligent person, and I have a lot of love. And really looking at the etymology of the word discipline, it comes from the word disciple, which actually means to learn out of love. So as opposed to forcing and the word was sort of misappropriated by the Roman military, sort of as opposed to this rigid, sort of forceful sense of discipline, can I instead, with diligence, learn from love and understand what supports me and my creativity from the place of love? Because operationally, if I'm doing that, it looks the exact same as discipline. I'm still up at 6:30 in the coffee shop, right? But there's no force. And so it is such a dance and maintaining that. But and it's been a tough for me. I was an athlete for a long time. I have a very strong militaristic mindset as well. But just a little shot of love in there, and understanding that it's about learning. It's not about discipline. I've never had a shortage of learning or curiosity. It's just when it gets thrown in this hat of shoulds, these parentheses shoulds. And obviously that's all nice to say, when you have bills and people to take care of, right? And so maintaining the flexibility in our attention and how we can open up our aperture of attention, like a film on a camera, right? How much are we letting in at any given time, considering what is needed to call forward, what I need to call forward, right? My administrative self, my business self, my creative self, et cetera. So creating ritual around that is really helpful, because then you have meaning already built into the ritual. And it really compounds.
Right. And you talk about different things coming in, and I notice we have some different people coming into the space, some familiar faces. I see Normal Guy, our friend. Hello. How we doing? Jarrett, nice to see you. Mary, the Faku, the Northern. Thank you guys for hopping in. We're kind of having a philosophical discussion on creativity and writing, and how can we somewhat become channels, or um, strike this balance between discipline, action, and consistency, and letting things come through us without forcing. So, Brian, I'm curious your thoughts, and if anybody else wants to pop up and speak, feel free to request. Like, internally for you, try to strike this balance between, okay, I have a commitment to publish something every day, publish a newsletter every week, do the levers necessary to grow my business, etc., and try to make that not come from force. Because that's what I see in myself sometimes. I'm like, I gotta write something today, I gotta publish something, and then that energy creates this forceful energy where then the writing is quite mechanical and lacks like emotional resonance. So I'm curious, what's that like for you?
Yeah, well, I really try and bake it into the system of my week. Like, I really try and remove a certain like lens of paradigm of time, and really just understand that my life is just a repeating sort of 7-day system, just like a 24-hour habit. And so I know that I have certain blocks on Tuesday, big 3-4 hour blocks, where I'm wearing a certain hat, right? I can brainstorm, be
Mhm.
as messy as possible, and just write and be creative, and just kind of creatively throw up on the page for 3 hours, right? And then a part of the ritual, right? And then maybe it's some movement, some walk. There's sort of a threshold, a marker, and recognizing that I'm leaving that sort of behind. And then I'm coming back in with the editor's hat. And so I have my week sort of planned out of when I need to hit these big levers. And the way I always speak on it is like, my circles aren't too loose or aren't too tight. Meaning, like, the requirement is not too strict, but also not too loose. I try and just maintain this sort of proportionality um, within what I put on the schedule and what's in front of me. And it's literally, it's like, okay, Tuesday's business, Wednesday's business. Boom, here's my little punch list. Like, I go analog, like I write it out on a piece of paper, and then it's a review at the end of the night. It's like, how did I do with today's business? And most of the time it's like, it's not a 10 out of 10, right? But that's okay. It's the freedom of recognizing that, hey, if it wasn't on the punch list and if I didn't have this review, it wouldn't have been a 7 out of 10 either. right? And so really kind of playing with the polarity of like setting containers for myself in which I can then create freedom. And another really practical way to do that is like, I, I'm like fairly neurotic, so I can fall into the trap of like reevaluating my life and my creativity and my decision making on a weekly basis. If I'm not careful, like I'm literally reevaluating all the time. So it's okay. I put big blocks on the calendar every quarter or so, like 3 days. And if I want, I can take that entire time to deconstruct and reconstruct the way I'm moving from top to bottom. But up
Mm.
until that period in which I have it on the calendar, I'm actually not making decisions. These have already been predetermined. They've already been made. And I'll have my day in court when I can assess the data and reevaluate and see how the content's doing, right? But I really, really create containers for that. And that's just because I recognize my own shortcoming and that I'll just want to reevaluate every day if I don't.
Dude, you're giving me a great idea here. I'm literally putting this on my calendar right now of a quarterly life review. I think it's actually genius because I'm the same. Like, I can get kind of caught in a self-reflective cycle of like every day, every week. But actually having that space to zoom out for like 3 days and step back from the rat race and step back from the daily flow and just see, okay, where am I? Where am I going? How can I readjust? How can I reorient? It's actually what I was just talking to Nick Huno about. Like, he's in this massive season of reorientation. And what I found in my journey is that where I started and the vision for what I had for my brand and business when I started is quite different in many ways than what it's evolved into now, but there's also similarities. But it's been these moments of deep reflection, deep stillness that have allowed me to evolve and iterate. So maybe I would love to hear you touch on this idea of evolution in your quote unquote personal brand or your creator business and maybe how that's evolved for you over your journey and how it might be similar or different to the vision you had for where you started.
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'm in a complete overhaul right now, sort of like rebranding my entire business and my entire essence is sort of what I represent. And I'm not afraid to do that. And it's actually a return to what I started with. First couple of months, I was sort of in a certain bucket and then I shifted gears a little bit. And that was just based off of what I was sort of the feedback I was getting from my audience. I was able to bring something pretty novel to X within the whole somatic therapy. And there's a lot of curiosity around that. So I really trusted that and allowed the iteration and that feedback to inform the decision making. And it got me to where I needed to be in so many ways. But I also lost touch with what we're talking about here, the evolution, the creative impulse, I wear many faces. I don't want to live in a box. And I felt myself with the friction of wanting to adapt, shift, move, shift off, but feeling the pressure to maintain or stay a certain way because something was working, whatever it is. But, when I think of growth or evolution, I think of, like developmental fulcrums. We hit, just like in psychology, we hit different stages of development. And in order to move past that fulcrum, you have to transcend it. And now transcend means to include, right? Not to sever, not to leave behind, not to deny, not to amputate. I have to include and build on top of, right? So the mistake or the friction or whatever it was that I was feeling that got me to this point, that's what's informing the decision making moving forward, right? And I feel pretty clear about that. And maybe I'll have 12, 18 months and really like live in this world that I'm about to build and then the next fulcrum will arrive and I'll have to sort of reinvent from scratches again. But if it comes from the love of learning, if it comes from the love of diligence and really the reverence for the word and this work and the people's attention and what this is, then I can trust that. Like I can trust my ideas and I can trust the philosophy that I can bring to the table way more than myself. And I could break that down a little bit if that makes sense. But um, that's where I try and stack my chips into. What's trying to move through me? Not 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 Brian. Not Brian.
Mm,
Too limited. Too limited.
mm. And how do you connect to that feeling, that intuition, or that source?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm just such an embodied person. I process it through my body, and so I mean, I do a lot of somatic work, and so um, and to fold it into kind of the creativity, this is actually a big part of the process too, and it's a big part of the process of how I use AI also. And so let's say there's something lighting me up, there's an idea, long form, whatever. I'll spend 20, 30 minutes with Claude, with an AI, just like a sponge, consuming as much material as I could possibly consume on this topic or a couple of these topics. And then I close my computer and I go into my living room and I put on my eye mask, maybe play a little music, and I just let it all go and dance and move and stretch and do animal flow and just be in my body for the next 20, 30 minutes. But I'm creating space. I'm trying to diffuse my energy. So when I'm really focused, my energy is really concentrated on what's in front of me, right? Task oriented. And then I get into my body and try and diffuse it. And then from there, I just sort of play with what then comes to my mind from that download, from that sponge, from that brainstorm. My mind, the pattern recognition will start making connections, right? And that's my favorite type of intelligence because, yes, you have all this information, but then where's the felt sense? Where's the emotion? Where's the feeling intelligence? Right. And so that sort of process, and then what I land on, then again, I can have a lot of faith in that. And so that's what I pick up and carry from there. So that's a huge part of the process for me.
Mm, I love it. And we've spoken about this before, but I've kind of indirectly come to somatic work without knowing that I was doing somatic work, just through guided meditation, sound healing, hypnosis, and like almost watching what the body's doing as the response, and then noticing like what idea is triggering in my mind at the exact same
Beautiful.
time that the body is making a certain response.
Yep.
Um, Nick and I just talked about this on the podcast too. It's very interesting. He was basically saying it's kind of subtle to be able to distinguish between the ego's desire and the soul's desire, and that even if the ego has a desire, one, it's not bad, but also that if the ego has its own idea, its own desire, the body actually still might respond in the same way that the spirit coming through makes the body have a similar response. So maybe I would love to hear if you have any ideas on that distinction between how do you almost decipher or filter between, is this new idea, is this new evolution of myself, is it coming from the ego, or is it coming
Hmm.
from a deeper part of me? Is it coming from the spirit?
Yeah, I play a lot with the felt sense experience of expansion versus contraction, right? And so expansion, feeling it like a lightning, a spaciousness. Again, your energy's kind of diffusing and getting bigger versus contraction, tightening in, closing in, your energy sort of collapsing in on itself. So I play with that oscillation a lot in a really like fantastic way to do that. When I kind of play with, especially when it comes to like decision making, and this is kind of it's a little out there, but I love it. It makes a lot of sense to me. Is like I do a lot of work with an eye mask on. I sort of believe who you are with the eye mask on is who you are.
Mm,
And so I'll kind of put an option, like I'll write down a piece of paper, something I'm chewing on each end of the room. And I'll put on my eye mask and I'll sort of, with my felt sense, sort of move my body into the direction of this choice, into this direction of this future possibility. And then I pay really close attention to the pull to disassociate, like leave my body. Again, I'm in dark. It's weird. It's uncomfortable. You're using your radial intelligence, not your mind's intelligence. And so I'll come up to an edge where the fear kicks in, that autonomic response, like you were talking about. And maybe that a certain choice is asking me to leave my body more. I can feel my energy kind of contracting and collapsing in my body, which means it's pushing my consciousness like further out of my body into disassociation, right? Or on the contrary, the more I can sort of approach that edge where I feel that fear, I feel that impulse, and I can sort of breathe and open up into it expansiveness and then push a little bit further, that choice holds more embodiment for me. So it's really, and this isn't an exact science, right? But it's a way that you can begin to play with your systems oscillation between expansion and contraction in relation to things that are on your heart. And again, it's using it in that felt sense. Like, sure, I'll do my pro and con list. I'll talk to my people, whatever. but really wanting to bring in the felt sense, because then I know I'm also including my feeling intelligence as well.
It kind of reminds me of if you guys are familiar with David Hawkins and power versus force, this muscle testing idea, how you can kind of verify truth through the body's natural response to truth or falsehood. And it works the same if your body's the tuning fork to, you could call it a higher timeline in the quantum field, and the body will tell you what is the way forward. And there's a really great exercise that I'm actually trying to find the meditation real quick, and I can link it below for you guys. But essentially, the meditation is this: you visualize yourself in your life currently as it is at level 5, and then you go down one level and imagine what it would be like one level lower at level 4, and your body will
Mm,
start contracting, and then ideas associated with that contraction will happen. So for
that's
me,
exactly right.
if I go down to level 4 or level 3 is like, okay, I'm gonna go work a job. And like my body is literally closing up versus I start to go up to 6, I start to go up to 7, I start to go up to 8. I'm like, I'm traveling around the world, I'm writing, I'm getting into music, I'm DJing. And so it becomes very obvious in that state, while the mind might think it's rational to be at level 3 and get the job for practicality's sake, the spirit wants to expand. So I'm gonna try to
Beautiful.
find this guided meditation for you guys and link it below. It's not my own creation. It's actually from a guy named Frederick Dotson. If you're familiar with him, he's got a bunch of great books around manifestation, energy, and all this stuff. So I'm gonna drop it below. But while I find that, do you have any more ideas on that topic, Brian, or maybe a place where somebody could start using this practice?
Yeah. I mean, the primary skill to be developed is the skill of interoception, which is just the ability to recognize and attune to your own internal bodily signals. And so the starting point is sort of identifying where you live on the spectrum of interoception, meaning how strong that skill is for you. Because there are folks like myself who maybe are a little bit more neurotic. At times in my life, I've bordered on sort of what's it called? Not hyper. You think something's wrong with you, and it's because I have a really heightened skill of interoception. So I'm really able to feel into my internal sensory environment. And sometimes it's so overwhelming and uncomfortable that I label it as bad or dangerous or whatever, yada, yada. And now there are a lot of people who are more disconnected from their own internal bodily signals. And maybe they're a little bit more attuned to other people's needs or other people's signals, et cetera. They don't quite have such a strong muscle there. And so it's just sort of identifying what is your current relationship to your internal world, and what is your ability to attune to those signals, feel the subtle sensations without applying meaning or interpretation on them, because the interpretation and the meaning is where a lot of people get hung up. And so again, for me, sorry, I'm such a big IMAS guy, and I don't even really like the word meditation because it has so much connotations to it. But in the way that you were saying how you can sort of feel some of those thoughts or some of those, again, behavioral memories or memories from a past life or whatever it is, that kind of reveal themselves to you, they're coming to you through your biofield, your energy centers, your chakras, right? Um, and so you don't have to meditate to be able to work with that field, with that energy. Again, some subtle movement is really crucial, but I think it can be really important to remove the visual stimulus, because that's where 90% of our stimulus is, and we're so attached to it in the material world. It can be a little illusory. So interoception is really that first primary skill. It's the basis of kind of everything, in my opinion.
I see. And maybe for people that want to start out and practice this, and I'm interested in trying the thing you said, the example you gave. So, what you do is you lay down on the ground with an eye mask and you put two pieces of paper on each side of the room with basically different ideas or possible realities for your future. Is that right?
Correct.
And then you
Yep.
notice what's happening in your body when you start to move towards one of them.
That's exactly right. So it's sort of this body as compass sort of exercise. Your body, yeah, becomes this axis. And so you
Mm,
be mindful of two things as you're moving towards them. the contraction versus expansion, and the disassociation versus embodiment, right?
And you want
That's
embodiment and you don't want disassociation. Is that right?
correct. If
Okay.
if if a choice or a possible future is asking you to fragment and come out of your body, it's asking you to protect, right? It's asking you to disassociate. It's asking you to not transcend in the sense you're not being inclusive of where you're at. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And so, yes. And so, but it's about finding that edge. And this is actually, there's a lot of neuroscience on this. So, what you're activating is your temporal parietal junction, sits on each side of the brain. And it's the same part of the brain that's responsible for spiritual experience as for your body's spatial awareness, right? And so that's not an accident. It's the same part of the brain that allows you to be completely here, right, in your body and beyond,
Mm.
right? In meditation or in the field or whatever it is. This is kind of what think of parapsychology. The word para in Greek means along with and beyond. So we're here, we're next to, we're with, and we're also somewhere bigger.
Hmm.
And so activating both sides of that temporal junction is just crucial. And then if you want to just masterclass it, you want to get a little vestibular activation, which sits right below the TPJ, which is responsible for like our balance, our equilibrium, and et cetera. And you can really activate this through jumping, through movement, through dancing, through spinning, through kind of playfulness, right? If you're in like a gymnast, you're in a gymnasium flipping, like they're getting all this vestibular activation. So it's really pulling them into their body. And so when I'm doing somatic work, I'm thinking about these crucial parts of the brain, the two sides of the TPJ to get the bilateral stimulation of the left hemisphere, the right hemisphere, both here and beyond. And then the vestibular of being fully free in your body and oriented around the space around you. So like 20 minutes a day of that type of work, I think is way more effective than an hour of talk therapy or whatever. Like that for me, that's the path that I found that's most useful for me.
Wow. Did you arrive at this practice just through experimentation or did you learn it somewhere?
Mainly through experimentation, if I'm being frank. I mean, I spend a lot of time with the eye mask on, feeling my way through space. But it's through, connecting like I didn't, I was reading Scott Barry Kaufman's book, I think on like transpersonal or psychology or something like that. And it was that thing in there, like, oh, this is the part of brain that's activated during mystical experience. I was like, oh shit. It's literally the exact part of the brain that is responsible for our body's spatial orientation. I was like, that can't be a coincidence. And then you think of, Joe's work and big meditative practices. What are you doing in meditation? You're pulling your consciousness up through the 7 energy centers of the body, up and out to touch this certain point where you have a blissful, mystical, transcendent experience. And so that's literally like full activation of both sides. You're fully here, but you're fully beyond too.
Mm. Well, dude, I'm stoked to try this out. Like, if I kind of reflect back, some of the most mystical experiences or empowering experience that I've had have been with the eye mask on. There was once I did a MDMA therapy session one time with beautiful music and an eye mask, and there are a few things that compare to that experience. And so you don't need to do MDMA therapy necessarily, but just having this as a daily practice, I mean, I'm gonna start incorporating this. I might try it right after this space.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And like, listen, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. I mean, this is one of the 8 limbs of yoga, right? Sensory
Okay,
deprivation, right? There's 8 limbs of yoga. I think this is number 5 or number 6. I don't know the exact Sanskrit word, but this is like this isn't new. This isn't me. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants.
I see.
It just found me in a completely different way, right? And so I think it's incredibly important to really manage our inputs, and I do that with the eye mask.
Nice.
Because so many of us are so sensitive in that antenna. I think we've been conditioned like out of our sensitivity, but in so many ways into greater sensitivity, to sensitivity to other things. And so, I think in many ways it's a reclamation of our natural human system, right, and our divinity.
I mean, just even thinking about it, like practically, we spend so much of our day externally focused, always talking to people, always online, doing work. being in the physical environment, just tuning all that out for 20 minutes, 30 minutes a day, like, it just feels obvious that it's a super powerful practice. I see Mike actually came up to request to speak. So, Mike, did you have an idea you'd like to share or potentially a question?
Hey, Jack. Long time no chat. Good to see you again. Brian, appreciate all of your contributions. A couple of things that come to mind for me is for people that don't necessarily have a really good understanding of what it feels like to follow that intuitive process. A real physical manifestation or a physical version of that is holding a gyroscope. It's not, one for one applicable. Intuition is not a gyroscope per se, but it gives you a physical feeling in your hand of what something feels like when it has its own center of gravity.
Mm.
And intuition has its own center of gravity. And for those people that have never, held a gyroscope, it can be a little bit like holding a cat that doesn't want to be held. That's one thought that occurs to me. And then Brian, as you were talking about choosing two different directions across the room, and using your mask and almost like a divining rod, which way feels right. I love the analogy of tuning into what feels expansive versus what feels contracting. I think it's a great example. I did this little experiment decades ago as I was trying to find my way through a section of a city and making two choices as to whether or not I should go this direction or that direction, this goal or that goal. And in the moment, it got a little frustrating because neither felt right to me. So I ended up walking across the street towards goal number one, didn't feel right intuitively. And then I walked back, goal number two, and it got so frustrating. I was like, you know what? Just forget all this stuff. It's just too complicated. Not realizing that maybe neither goals were the place for me. Maybe it wasn't just north or south. Maybe it wasn't just two options. So I would just add that if you're getting that type of convoluted sensation about both goals, consider expanding, your horizons towards things that maybe you haven't conceived before. So that's the only thing that I thought of. But I'm really enjoying listening. So thank you guys for sharing.
Love it. Thank you for coming up and sharing that. I've never heard of a gyroscope. Would you be able to tell us what that is exactly? I imagine it's like a physical instrument.
Yeah, they use it in spacecraft. They use it sometimes in yachts, but it's a little bit like holding a yo-yo. Okay, if you've ever held a yo-yo, you can tell that yo-yo has a little bit of its own sense of pull. The difference is that a gyroscope has a rotational axis that goes in many different directions simultaneously, so it has its own center of gravity.
Mm.
Um,
Mhm.
and once again, Jack, if you've ever held a cat that's ready to be let go, that's what a gyroscope is. If you've ever held a cat with one hand that doesn't want to be held,
Okay.
that's kind of what a gyroscope. It's got its own center of gravity. It wants to do what it wants to do, and there'll be a tug. You'll feel a sense of will from it. There's a physics there that's going on. But
Mm.
definitely go get a gyroscope, man. It's if nothing else, they're kind of fun.
No, I mean, it sounds super interesting, and it kind of reminds me of I used to work with a crystal pendulum, actually. And I had this little board that would say yes or no or maybe or ask a different question. And you would hold the pendulum over the board. And somehow naturally, it just seemed to start to swing in the direction of yes, in the direction of no. And I mean, you could say it's pseudoscience, you could say it's not real. I know the scientific field says David Hawkins' work with muscle testing is not real, but in my experience, there is more to this universe than the laws of physics that we have been told. So these tools and instruments are very interesting. The subtle thing here, though, that I've realized with like pendulums or muscle testing or tarot cards or whatever it is like it can outsource that sense of agency and can actually weaken or atrophy your own connection to your intuition. Same with AI. Like for me, the more tapped in I am to my inner knowing, the less I will go ask AI for its perspective, or the less I will go ask for a tarot card or need anything like that. So I think it's interesting in this time where we have all these external tools to take that time, do the 20-minute in the eye mask and come back to that inner voice, because that inner voice, the intuition, it supersedes any external tool.
Yep.
But I would
It's
love,
better than
yeah,
any information you'll get from any LLM.
most definitely. So how do you navigate that, Brian? And feel free anybody else to hop in here with like AI being an assistant or supplement for thinking or a sparring partner versus accidentally atrophying your own critical thinking skills and outsourcing it to this technology.
Hmm. I definitely fell into the latter a little bit
Same.
last year, just in the sense that, if it has a specific intelligence, right? And like I found myself just in this kind of back and forth with it, and suddenly I'm like, my head hurts, and I'm like, I'm playing the AI's game here, not playing my game. It's very like enrolling in that way, and I'm sure there's some dopaminergic thing there. But I've in life, I'm realizing, just like life, what's important are the questions that you ask. And so these days, and I think I've finally found my system with it, I'm really, really clear and specific in my prompting and in what I look for. And I ask AI to ask me questions, sort of the insight and the pattern recognition of where I'm at, how I'm developing this, right? Be my creative sparring partner. Don't just give me first connections, give me, third and fourth connections, refine the gold in this, help me robust, da da da. If there's anything that isn't clear, I want you to ask me the questions. I never have it give me full drafts back. I'm just very, very boundaried with it. And that came through the pain of like slamming my head against the wall, like, why can't I finish this essay? And what is going on here with my Claude? I don't know. Like,
Right.
and so the big shift for me as of recent is sort of like the second brain, right? I have, I don't know, 50, 60,000 words of my original writing that it's referencing and everything now at this point. And then B, I really, really am trying to get it to ask me questions now, as opposed to the other way around.
I think that's super smart. And it comes from the frame of like, how do I use this tool to make me smarter instead of accidentally make me dumber? Because I started to notice, like, I started writing newsletters 3, 4 years ago, and I could rip a 3,000 word newsletter like nothing. And then after a few years, slowly using AI more and more as a thinking partner, it became more and more difficult to finish that newsletter. And I'm like, this is not how it should be. I should be getting smarter and better as I get older, not not have my mental skills be atrophied. And so internally, I've kind of set this boundary of like, if and it's a similar thing to any type of escapism. I've realized, like, if there's tension, it's easier to escape. It's easier to escape into whatever
Mhm.
vice you have. The AI becomes the vice. The AI becomes the mechanism for the escape from the tension of having to sit there and think things through. Um,
It-
yeah.
If you
Absolutely.
guys, it's funny you guys mentioned this about the AI because in the last 2 weeks I realized one, what Brian said about having the AI prompt you with questions to get your outputs, but also like the way the AI is tuned normally, if you don't put any guardrails on it, it gives you way too much information. And just from a pure standpoint, you don't need most of it. And then you need to sift through it. And have this decision fatigue of like, I need to now parse through this whole response and change how it responds to me. So I've been trying to get it to output way less so it's actually manageable. And then I noticed Amber wanted to talk also, but yeah, it's fun with the you need it to give you less, but that doesn't sell, and it's not as much of like a party trick for the AI companies. They want you to look like, oh, we have this whole summary, this whole essay that just came out. Look at how impressive our LLM is.
Mm.
Most definitely. Yeah, I would love to hear. I see Mike and Amber had their hands up, so feel free to hop in, guys.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for letting me have the mic. It's good to meet you. So the AI question, for a long time, I've been telling, especially Grok, to give like 30% of what it wants to. And sometimes I even have to remind it multiple times. But I find that much like if you give a human a restriction of you have 100 words to say this or 2 frames or whatever, we get more creative and we get more intentional. And I feel like the AI does the same thing. Um, and I am very like when I open a conversation with an I am very much like this is a collaboration. We are working together to create something. Like you are in this with me. And I'm not delegating how I'm thinking to it. I explain how I think. And then because I open the relationship the way that I do, the AI wants to figure out how I'm moving, and that's kind of normal for them in general, but it creates this dynamic where it's like you have these specific goals. I'm on board with helping you create those specific goals.
Mm.
And I did start a newsletter recently. You can see it on my profile, it's in my bio. And the other day, I was kind of brain dead and tired. I was like, okay, I just need to do this meta post and let's go. And I did a brain dump. I had Claude turn it into something, and I read it, and I was like, yeah, that's basically what I'm trying to say. I'm tired. I want to go do my evening, and I posted it. And then I took my evening my medicines, and I was meditating, and I kept on thinking about like specific lines in the post. And finally, I was like, oh, wait a minute. I have the guru voice here, and I'm super not okay. So I'm logging into Beehive stoned as fuck and trying to figure out how to replace this. And it was this interesting dynamic was like, I didn't trust the AI and I didn't trust myself because I was stoned, but trying to figure out how to create this post. And what I ended up doing was the body check. It gave me 3 paragraphs of what I was trying to rephrase, and I checked my body, which one is the correct one. And I posted that, turned off the computer, and I looked at it this morning and I was like, yeah, that was totally right. Thank you, body, for guiding me there. And I'm so grateful for those tools. And then as far as the body checks goes, for last year, I've been taking walks. I do a lot of walks anyways, but coming out of quarantine, like deep quarantine, I don't interact with very many people outside for health reasons, but I would ask my body, which direction do we want to go in this city? I would find the brightest point and walk towards it. And sometimes it would take me to various things. It's like, oh, this is a fountain I didn't know about in a town that I've lived in for 20 years. Holy wow. Or I went to New York. I got a paid scholarship trip to go to New York. I did the same thing there. And on a Monday evening, I found a digital art gallery, which is what I do, with a bunch of photos talking about manifestation. So this body check stuff, it really does lead you interesting places, and it's way better than what you could find on your own.
Most definitely. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think it ties in perfectly with everything we're talking about because in my experience, and I'm curious to know yours, Brian, as well, and anybody else that wants to share, but like if I'm writing and I'm trying to find the right word or sentence, it is my body that will tell me what is the right word rather than my mind. And that's only happened in the past year or two once I've actually started to live in my body and live from my body. But when you're writing, Brian, like are you kind of following the same thread? Like, are you writing from the body, or is it the mind first, the body second, or what does that look like?
It depends on what stage of the writing process, but the initial is just a massive brain dump, and I'm just like kind of writing from spirit. I'm kind of writing from like mania. Like I kind of let myself put the mad scientist hat on a little bit. And yeah, so I'm actually not thinking about that. I'm not thinking about the body as much in that process, but it's very much a part of the preliminary stages of sitting down to before it, get some of that energy out. Um, but yeah, that's funny you mentioned that with the word and the felt sense because that's a course that I put out last year. There was a whole module on the felt sense. That's the example that I use, right? Because you'll like find a word that it like completes the sentence just right. It sounds right. It makes sense, but it just feels off. And you'll notice you're kind of biting your fingernails or you're tapping your leg a little bit and you're just kind of a little uncomfortable in your body. And that's kind of that contraction showing up. Um, so anyways, I think that's a perfect example, but it's not as active when I'm in the thick of it. I'm really kind of trying to let myself go and let myself commune with whatever it is that's sort of emergent coming through me in that moment. I don't think I answered your
Yeah.
question, but yeah.
No, it makes sense. And I think if I reflect on my own process, there's like a flow state that happens first in the first draft where you're just letting it go. You're just letting it pour out of you. But it's the editing process where then kind of word by word, line by line, I'll be like, is the body expanding here? Is it contracting? Is it saying yes? Is it saying no? So it's,
Hmm.
I mean, that would be an interesting course for somebody to make or newsletter for somebody to write, be like writing from the body or something like that. I think it'd be powerful. So anybody feel free to take that idea. I could see you doing that, Brian. I could also see you doing that, Natalie. Um, but I see Mike still got his hand up here, so feel free to hop in again, Mike.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate what you shared, Brian. Appreciate what you also shared, Amber. As far as the going back to your initial premise of being concerned about becoming dependent upon external devices to help you tune into your intuition, you mentioned something to the effect of you were afraid or concerned about outsourcing your agency, crystals, tea leaves, or divining rods, whatever. Um, I mean, sure, I would imagine that people can use anything to a sense of dependency, but I'm also mindful that a lot of human agency in the way that we work with our minds versus our bodies is dependent upon an extremely limited view of the universe. Humanity's been here, recording Western civilization 5, 10,000 years. And a lot of what we perceive as agency is our own LLM training, everything that we've learned from generations prior to us, which may or may not be entirely correct in any way, shape, or form. So the idea of switching to something external and mixing it up, I, I, I would I would imagine that it's a pretty safe bet, tuning into different modalities or ways of coming to decisions is going to be overall, net benefit versus, allocating agency. And then when it when you were mentioning agency as it comes to AI, I've read some of the reports about people becoming, mentally lazy or it having a negative effect on people. I haven't personally had that experience because I'm constantly challenging AI to think outside the box. Um, I'm not satiated by its limited knowledge base. I'm maybe just because I've done so much studies myself that I'm able to synergize facts that I haven't been able to see Grok or Claude or Gemini be able to synergize. I mean, they can talk on any given subject, but when it comes to
Hmm.
synergizing different subjects to draw new, previously not well known paradigms, it's not very good at that. So I'm constantly engaged in challenging AI in these conversations. And what I like about it is at the very least, it's a sounding board. So it's a way to get ideas outside of the head. Sure, I write by hand, I type, I do that. That's a way of getting it out. But when you say it, when you verbalize it, you can share it with a friend. Epiphanies can occur. And at the same time, some of the subjects and topics that I like to delve into can easily, exceed any friend's bandwidth. If I want to go on a 7-hour exploration of quantum physics and how it relates to spirituality, you can do that with AI without wearing it out. And it can track all of the different variables that you're throwing at it at the speed of light. It can track it. And then it can bring up research. And that's one thing I really, really like. And I'm constantly having to get, Grok to do correct research. And I have to create custom prompts in order to facilitate that process. But I can build on the previous knowledge of humanity. So if I come up across a social psychological study that talks about the effects of such and such on the body as it relates to, it allows me to weave things quickly at like literally the speed of light, and I don't ever have to worry about overextending it, especially since Grok has been able to have a much larger token window. In the beginning, you know, I would start a conversation, an in-depth, deep, exploration on any given number of topics with Grok, and literally within the same day, like within the same conversation, it didn't even have the bandwidth to remember the beginning of the conversation. Now it does, and it's getting better and better and better at that. But I definitely understand how some people could be outsourcing their agency entirely to AI. I haven't personally had that experience, and I'm a big advocate of using whatever resources available to you, mixing it up, get like on GPS coordinates. When it comes to triangulation, as many points as you possibly can gives you a more fine-tuned, you are here map of the universe. That's just kind of what came to mind there.
Yeah, appreciate that perspective a lot, Mike. I enjoy listening to you speak about these things. It's quite insightful. I'm curious, just as a little tangent, what do you do for a career? Like, are you a writer yourself, or what's your background?
Well, I started out with writing, but the topics that I dove into, I came across some very, very powerful forces in the world pretty quickly and have been entirely humbled by that experience. So that's a much longer conversation. I'm having to take a step back and see how I want to move forward in the world. I've looked at digital marketing, I've looked at writing, I've looked at music, and any ways that I've been able to try and make a difference in the world, from designing cultural development centers or whatnot. And no matter what you do in the world, is what I'm finding is that there's just the world. Jack, that's a long conversation, but my experience is that some things are the way they are because they are, and they don't want to be changed. And for the vast majority of my life, I've been looking at trying to build bridges and create change and positive change in the world. It's been the past decade that I've realized that some of these institutions don't want change, and I'm having to reevaluate my place in it. But for most of my life, I've been kind of just dedicated towards how can I be a constructive force for change in the world. And a lot of the bridges that I sought to originally build, I've come to understand, there's forces in the universe that just don't want those bridges built, or forces on this planet necessarily. I feel like that's an incredibly vague
Mhm.
answer, but I feel like I'm doing your audience an extreme justice by keeping it vague because it's been a long, hard journey that we're not going to go into. But I appreciate the question very much so. And yes, I do write for myself. I just don't publish that much, hardly at all.
I see. No, it's very interesting, and we'll have to connect. I'm curious to know more, but I think it's kind of a north star that probably brings all of us here together is being bridge builders to some type of new level for humanity. Um, Now, I haven't come against industrial systems or higher elites myself yet, and I wouldn't like to, but we'll see if that happens at some point. But it is quite interesting as we're kind of in this alternative space, exploring these alternative, esoteric, kind of on the edge ideas of how would the general population to respond to these things. But I mean, this has been a super fun conversation, and it completely went in a way that I didn't expect, which is always fun when we get a good group of people together. But we've been going on for a little over an hour here, and so I want to be respectful of Brian's time and everybody's time. And I actually have something coming up in about 20 minutes, but to kind of wrap things up here, I wanted to open the floor if anybody else wanted to come up and offer any insights or ask any questions before we hop off. Or Brian, if you had any final closing ideas that you wanted to touch on, now would be the time.
You want to jump in? Everyone want to speak?
Let's
Hi,
see.
Brian.
Hey, Nick.
Well, I
No.
guess you guys brought up a lot of really cool things in this space. As I guess maybe a bit of a summary, it sounds like Brian kind of mainlines what would normally be the end goal of a lot of practices for that are self-improvement practices or spiritual practices, which is to change your state. And I know he had a post that I saw some months ago, maybe, where he pointed out something very important, which is, I believe it was him, but I'm like 95% sure. He'll correct me. Is that a lot of people kind of draw a dividing line between their psychological environment and their physical body, but your brain is a part of your body. So what you do to your body is very directly going to affect your brain, which is generating your psychological state. And these techniques and these tactics of whether you kind of extend the boundaries of your physicality, let's say, toward external objects, and you use that as almost a dowsing style tool to try to sharpen your senses, very similar to if you're driving a car. It doesn't need to be so esoteric. When you're driving a car, you know if something's going to hit the back of a car. The boundaries of your sensation kind of expand to utilize the objects at play. Now with AI, that can be a bit tricky because we're already a little bit out of control of our thoughts and things like that. But like Mike said, whatever tools work for people, and it's also very dependent on what you're creating and the reason you're using the tools. And if you're trying to introspect and find something within yourself, it's a bit different if you're trying to produce 2 articles a week or something, right? You might want to employ some different modalities.
Thanks, Nick. That was great. Loved hearing that. Yeah. What a wrap up. What a wrap up. I don't really have much else to add, Jack. Thanks for having me on. I'm, excited to be here. It's always fun just chopping it up with a bunch of like minds. You don't really find this anywhere else. So it's really a treat.
No, this was fun, and it's kind of cool and exciting for me to think about the future of in-person events, especially given the nature of this conversation and how fun it was and new people popping up like Mike and Amber speaking. And we really appreciate you guys popping up and sharing some insights and steering the conversation in some different directions. And I think this is just a glimpse of this future that we're creating, these creative ideas of bringing people together. And the original purpose of this space is actually to bring people together for something called the Creator Economy Convention. So I'm going to
Ah,
speak on it very
actually,
quickly.
actually, Jack, the Future
Yes.
Proof Creator Summit.
Okay, so the name has officially been changed.
Yes, on the website.
Gotcha. Okay, let me find the link and I'm going to try to pin it here in the chat. But in essence, there is a convention that is happening in Vancouver, Canada in June 2026. And I've just pinned the website actually to the top of the space. So if you scroll up, you can see the livinginternet.com. And it's essentially a 3-day in-person mastermind summit to listen to some of the thought leaders in the creator space, as well as interact with a bunch of people that are multi-passionate, creating online businesses, writing online, and thinking about how to actually build and create the future. So I have the privilege of speaking at this event. Brian is also a speaker, as well as Nick. Remind me, are you speaking at this event?
I might wind up speaking. We'll see how much of a wild card piece, what kind of wild card information I might develop in between now and then.
Okay, nice. Well, regardless, Nick will be there. And Natalie will be there as well and speaking, as well as some bigger names in the space who you might know about. Dan Coe, Kieran Drew, Taylor Simmons, etc. You can find all that information on the website. There's also a free community you can join that is called the Living Internet Alliance Community. As of now, that name might change, but the theory behind that is there's a lot of dead content on the internet. And by dead content, I mean AI content, slop content, not authentically created by human content. And so this alliance, it's for creators that want to retain that intrinsic agency style of creation, kind of similar to what we're talking about in this conversation. So if you're curious, you can go on the website and join that community for free and meet a bunch of cool people. There's also a bunch of resources in that community, and you can check out the convention, the Future Proof Summit, I should say, if you're curious about that. So, if you have any questions about that, feel free to send me a message. Feel free to send Nick a message or Natalie a message, and we'd be happy to get you the right info. But other than that, this space will be posted on YouTube and Spotify. So you guys can check that out at. Thank you for listening to the Living Internet Alliance podcast. For updates on all future episodes, please subscribe to the channel and share this episode far and wide to other creators who you think would resonate. As a reminder, there is a 50% off discount window for tickets for the Creator Economy Convention in Vancouver from June 5th to June 7th, happening through December 1st. So If you want to come to the convention, if you want to secure your ticket, this will be the lowest price that tickets will ever be available. So you can check out the link below at thelivinginternet.com to buy your tickets and also to join our free circle community. With that, thank you for listening to this episode, and we will see you in the next one.